So what exactly are the Milwaukee Bucks? I've seen Bucks fans saying that this is a team that should be counted as a contender and will be in the top 4 of the East, while many NBA fans, and for a while myself, saw this as a team that's not even going to be relevant in the upcoming season. As always, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, so we're going to talk about this team's roster and a little bit about the free agency as well, because despite having probably one of the not better rosters and definitely not one of the better outlooks from a draft pick standpoint, Milwaukee actually had a pretty decent free agency. And the Bucks have absolutely loaded themselves on team-friendly contracts that for the future might help them out, but is this enough to help out Giannis now? Let's get into it. This is 30 teams in 30 days. Let's get into the Milwaukee Bucks. So last year, Milwaukee went 48-34, finished 5th in the Eastern Conference. They had around the 11th best offense, 12th defense, and 11th best net rating. Despite being one of the better teams in the East and just one of the better teams overall in the NBA, this has been another season of disappointment for Milwaukee, as this was the 3rd year in the row that they had lost in the first round of the playoffs. Clearly, what Milwaukee's been doing has not been working, but as I've mentioned before, and as we all know, the Eastern Conference is going to be wide open, and I think there's going to be a chance for a team that we don't expect to do something this year. On top of that, there have been a lot of reports that Giannis may be wanting out of Milwaukee, and it is understandable given the situation that the Bucks are in, even though Giannis does come across as a pretty loyal guy. But few players in NBA history are loyal enough to stay with a team when they fail to put the surrounding players with them. But let's talk about those players surrounding Giannis, because it's Giannis, I don't think I really have to talk about what he's capable of. One of the big pure signings of this offseason was that of Myles Turner. Now this is, in theory, a really good signing for the Milwaukee Bucks. He is Brook Lopez, but just better in every single way. He's a better three-point shooter, he's a better defender. Maybe not as much, maybe equal rebounders, but they both spend a lot of time away from the hoop. Turner is obviously better at finishing at the hoop. He's a better mid-range shooter. And Turner plus Giannis is probably one of the best front courts in the entire NBA. Really, how are you supposed to guard that? Especially because Giannis can be a playmaker, point guard like role on offense while being the center. But then you have one of the best spot-up centers that we've ever seen on the outside. This is the perfect combination. We all know that Lopez along with Giannis have always been a great combo. So Turner I don't really have any issues with, but the problem with Turner in itself is that he's really the second option and the second best player on the Bucks. And Myles Turner just, in my opinion, isn't really a number 2 kind of guy. Statistically, Turner's stats are down from the last few years. His scoring's down a little bit, his rebound's down a little bit, despite his minutes going up. At the age that Turner is, I'm also not expecting him to break out into anything that we haven't seen before. Meaning I don't suddenly expect him to become a number 2 player on a championship level team. I just expect him to be a really, really good starter, maybe a 3rd option on a championship level team. But beyond Myles Turner, the rest of Milwaukee is kind of just a bunch of generally good 3-point shooters who are on good contracts. This in itself can be really good for the Bucks' future and for the trade deadline, but I don't know if it's good enough to win right now. First off, you got one of the fan favorites in Milwaukee, Bobby Portis. So Bobby Portis is coming off of a pretty solid season. His stats were around 14 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists on shooting 36% from 3 with a PER just shy of 18. Consistently, Portis has been a fan favorite in Milwaukee, and he's always just been one of the best 6 men in the entire league, and he's a good guy to substitute in, especially if the Bucks want to run a bigger lineup or if they just want to keep continuous spacing, and he can give you some scoring even though he's not the most consistent player in the world. He is a little bit older, but his contract's not too bad, and he's not really a long-term guy who's going to get better for Milwaukee, but Portis also chose to stay in Milwaukee instead of signing with another team, so clearly he likes playing with Giannis and he believes in the team, and he's not the only one that chose Milwaukee over somewhere else. Another player like that is Gary Trent Jr., and Trent Jr. is actually coming off of a pretty solid season. Recently, he's become one of the league's better 3-and-D players, and his stats were around 11 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist, while shooting 41% from 3. On top of that, he also had a really good playoff series when they lost to the Pacers. Trent Jr. scored around 19 points per game, 4.5 threes, and 2.5 steals. Overall, he was probably their best player outside of Giannis. Though that's kind of an issue if Gary Trent Jr. of all people is your second best player. But he is a bit younger guy, he is on a good contract, and he's someone that if I'm a contender, I would want a guy like Gary Trent Jr. on my bench. Not much to say about him, but Darvin Ham's favorite player and a guy who always seems to be getting way too many minutes, Taurean Prince. The one good thing about Prince though is he has like a 41% three-point shooter, so that is always kind of a good thing to have, and at least that means he could space out the floor when he's unfortunately on the court. Now, I've seen a lot of Milwaukee Bucks fans talk about him, but Kevin Porter Jr., I've legitimately seen Milwaukee fans saying that he could be up to a 20-point per game all-star player this year. Yeah, I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous. However, Kevin Porter Jr. is coming off of a pretty solid stint in playing not for a super long time in Milwaukee. He averaged about 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game on 45, 31, 76 shooting splits with an above average PER. In his time in Milwaukee specifically, Kevin Porter Jr. shot over 40% from 3, which could be absolutely huge. We know that he's a good scorer, especially in isolation, and maybe we could see him scoring some more in the expanded minutes he's going to be getting this upcoming season. However, to counter that, I will say Milwaukee has so many guards, especially 2 guards. It is hard to say that KBJ is going to be able to get a whole lot of minutes there, especially if he can't play make at a super high level, because I don't think his assist to turnover ratio is the best. But if he can defend well, if he can score on his own, if he can shoot the ball well, he's going to carve himself out a role next to Giannis Antetokounmpo. Also, I should mention that he is coming off of a suspension for a domestic violence situation back in 2023. Hopefully, that is something that can be put in the past and no longer becoming an issue for him, and he gets better off the court. And then talking about their guard depth, one of the more underrated players in the league, and someone that kind of proves that Milwaukee's actually a pretty solid team in drafting, especially in the second round, but AJ Green. So the 25-year-old is coming off of a pretty solid campaign where he averaged about 7.5 points per game while shooting 42% from 3. He was an undrafted player that made a huge jump in his 3-point shooting and just his overall scoring and minutes this year. He became one of the league's best shooters at that 42% mark, and he was a pretty underrated defender as well, giving the Bucks positive defensive minutes. In the regular season, he had an on-off of about 7 points per 100 possessions, and that jumped up to 28 points per 100 possessions in the playoffs, so I would totally expect AJ Green to be getting more minutes, or for some teams to want to try to snipe him out of Milwaukee, because I think he's a really good player and he just needs more time. And another really good player, one of the best moves that Milwaukee made all free agency, especially for the value of his contract, but that was getting Cole Anthony after he was waived by the Memphis Grizzlies. So I did see a lot of Orlando Magic fans were actually pretty upset to see Anthony go, as he was just a fan favorite there, and I can totally see why. Last season, he averaged about 9 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists on 42, 35, 82 shooting splits. This is a guy who's been a good defender, decent playmaker, he's been a consistent scorer for most of his career, and he can really just add in, and I think he even said himself that he's excited to play with Giannis and he's excited to join this Bucks team. He's a guy that for the overwhelming majority of his career has always been positive minutes. The second Cole Anthony steps onto the court, you're going to do a little bit better per 100 possessions than when he stepped off the court. So I think by having that combination with him, Giannis, and Turner, it may not be the most flashy combination in the world, but it wouldn't surprise me if that group is going to be an efficient group that gives you positive minutes. And at the end of the day, when you're in this weird Milwaukee situation, positive minutes is what you need to be looking for. And then 2 other rotational players that I do want to mention, guys who aren't really as good, but Gary Harris, he also left Orlando, and that one he didn't really see the same fanfare for. Although Milwaukee definitely seemed like they wanted Harris, I think it's kind of a weird signing given that he's going to be like their 3rd string shooting guard or like a 3rd string small forward. However, Harris was also touted as a pretty good locker room leader and just a good presence to have on a team. And for the value that they got him, which I'm pretty sure is a minimum value, I do think Harris is a better player than a minimum value, so he might be someone worthy of getting some level of minutes. And then somebody who shouldn't be getting maybe any minutes, I've probably been one of the bigger defenders of Kyle Kuzma, and I've always wanted to believe in ever going back to his days on the Lakers, and since he was an all-rookie player, I really thought there was a time where Kyle Kuzma could be one of the better scoring forwards in the league. And then he just wouldn't develop, and then it would take a little longer, and then it would take a little longer, and then eventually we got to a point where Kyle Kuzma just hit his ceiling, and then instead of hitting and stealing and staying at it, he kind of got worse and worse and worse. So his career has been trending downward, and that really showed off last season, because last year he had a career where his turnover percentage, win shares, offensive and defensive box plus minus with the 2nd worst value over replacement player of his entire career. He's coming off of another poor playoff showing where he averaged just 6 points per game and probably shouldn't have even been on the court in that time. Despite all of this, Milwaukee has stated that they still do believe in the Kuz, and even Kyle Kuzma himself has said that he's going to be focusing on basketball this offseason and that there's going to be a return to the basics and fundamentals. That's good. Maybe it makes me a little more optimistic about his future, but what do you mean return to basketball and the fundamentals and being invested in basketball? Isn't that like what you were supposed to be doing every offseason? Two other guys worth mentioning, even though they're older for younger players. I do want to mention both Ryan Rollins and Andre Jackson Jr. So Ryan Rollins was another second round pick. He's a good 3-and-D player. He shot 41% from 3, and he's going to be only 23 years old. Going on top of that, Andre Jackson Jr., another former second round pick, he shoots 40% from 3 while not being an awful defender. It also looks like both he and Milwaukee do want to get a contract signed, and that's going to be something talked about during the season, and I've saw reports about probably $9 to $12 million, but that value could go up depending on the Bucks shooting guard depth. And I know the Bucks second round draft pick, I'm putting his highlights up here, the Bucks second round draft pick from this draft, who is from Serbia, but I just cannot pronounce his name. I have heard some decent things about him, and we know that the Bucks can draft well in this second round. It's just a matter of like if he's going to get meaningful minutes this year. A lot of these players that I mentioned are on good contracts, and I think from a pure free agency standpoint, Milwaukee did well. They're probably at that like B plus, maybe even low A- range, just because they got good players on team-friendly deals. However, because of the Damian Lillard trade, they don't have a reason not to win. But I look at this roster, and they would need everything to go perfect in order to win. Giannis would need to have another career year and stay healthy, which is probably going to happen, but Turner would probably need to take a step into being that number 2. Kevin Porter Jr. would have to probably become that near all-star level player that some fans want him to be. And then the rest of this team would have to stay healthy, be that 3-and-D kind of team, and then Bobby Portis would probably have to be that good 3rd or 4th player and be that 6th man of the year candidate. Well, this is stuff that's not impossible. It would require multiple players to hit into their prime, and it would require multiple players to have the best years of their career, something I just kind of don't see happening. And the real thing that we're going to have to watch for throughout the season is this enough for Giannis? The Greek Freak is going to be 31 at the end of this season, and with no draft picks and with no like big guys who are prospects on this roster, I don't really feel excited for this team to go out and get somebody unless it's through free agency. This year kind of feels like it's going to be just an off year where all you're going to do is hope some guys develop, hope Giannis doesn't get injured, but really for Giannis's 30 to 31-year-old season is probably going to be another really good season that doesn't get a good result to show for it. I still think this is going to be a playoff or at the very least a play-in team. I mean, without the Celtics, without the Pacers, or at least those teams being dropped, I think the Bucks are going to be around that probably 5 to 8 range. Milwaukee before this free agency was a team that I was calling dead in the water. They got rid of Dame, which did not make Giannis happy. Giannis is getting older, but it's not showing off on the court. They don't really have any incredible young prospects, but they've basically surrounded one of the most dominant players we've ever seen in league history with a bunch of 3-and-D players. That alone is going to give you some pretty incredible success. I'm not completely negative on this Bucks team. I think that there are some reasons to look forward to them, and I think there are some reasons that Giannis will want to stay. It's just unfortunate that Doc Rivers, of all people, is coaching this team because that could be something that affects this team's ceiling. But regardless of what happens, Giannis is going to have one of the greatest seasons that we have ever seen because we have just seen the Greek Freak get surrounded by a bunch of team-friendly contracts who are a bunch of 3-and-D specialists, and those are guys who can prove themselves and either get traded or develop themselves into even better players, and maybe, just maybe, things can turn around in Milwaukee. This was 30 and 30. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and I will catch you all next time.